very informal, but I just thought, I might as well just capture this in a podcast, kind of I don't know how to explain it, but kind of a podcasting interview style, just so as we talk about
Sure,
this stuff, we've got some things
absolutely.
that, you know, we can use. But anyway, so you were talking about how you're using AI, and even though it's smart, it's still like it does things in a certain way, even if you try to get different styles
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
It's so when it first came out, there was a lot of discussion about all the different stuff like ChatGPT could do and everything. And as I've started using it, there's like it's generative, right? It's called generative AI. So the idea is that it's creative, it's generating new stuff, but ultimately it's not. It's mimicking. It's an
Hmm.
algorithm that uses predictions to try to predict what the next token or word or whatever would be. Well, because of that, it just kind of mimics what it's trained on, and it's clear that it's trained on the general sort of internet writing. I actually just recently published an article in my little newsletter, and I'm really curious because I wrote it and I wrote it the way I kind of went back and forth, and I used ChatGPT to give me suggestions about pieces of it. And then I sent the whole article over when I was done, my whole first draft, and said, revise this and optimize it for LinkedIn. And what it gave me back was very different than what I wrote. So I'm actually want to do a poll, and I'm just curious, what do people think is better, the authentic one or the one that ChatGPT optimized? Because even though I said to use my voice and I was using a retrieval augmented generation, so I had already I'm using a GPT
Hmm.
specifically, not just ChatGPT, a GPT that I trained and gave it a bunch of my own writing and said, okay, now that you know my writing, stick to my style, but it didn't. It was still
Really
very much ChatGPT-ish. So I
interesting.
published it up there, and I'm like, okay, let's see. But I really want to do kind of a side-by-side comparison to see if because I personally think the other one is better. And at the conference, I think it was Jason Miller made this point that like authentic human written content is going to be quite valuable soon as the world gets populated with all this AI stuff. And I kind of see that because the AI stuff has a similar theme and tune to it.
Huh? Do you think AI will ever get to the point where you can't tell anymore?
I do. Sam Altman. I was listening to a couple of his podcasts and his interviews, and one of the things that he says, which is true, is that this is the dumbest AI will ever be. This is the
Right.
slowest it will be. This is the dumbest.
Yep.
It will only get it improved from here. So I remember like just at the beginning of Google, there was Google and Yahoo search that were sort of fighting, and there was Netscape browsers. There was all this stuff going on, and it was kind of the Wild West at the time, and it wasn't apparent who was going to win. But Google, as they refined their algorithm, it got bigger and bigger, and then has now embedded itself into our culture. Like people just Google something even before trying to figure it out on their own. They'll just Google
Right.
it, which
Yeah.
is sort of interesting. And I'm worried. That's a different conversation. I worry about that because if we don't use it, we lose it. If we don't use our
Hmm.
ability to problem solve and think, or in the case of AI, to create, where is it from ourselves that the ideas truly come from, right?
Right.
Meditation, it could come from all, it could just, usually it just like pops into your head when you're on a walk or whatever. It's just sort of instant. It's like, oh, I got this idea. Let's see how I can flesh it out. AI can't do that. That's something it cannot ever do, but it might be able to mimic to the point where it's really getting difficult to distinguish. And I think that's really cool from a metaphysical standpoint to really kind of go out here
Right.
is I think what that will do for us humans is start getting us to question, well, what separates us from that?
Right.
Why am I different than an AI? And I think that sort of existential crisis is important for us. I think it's like, okay, well, where is our role? And I see a lot of fear in like in higher ed, teachers, instructional designers, systems. Everyone's worried about getting replaced. And I mean, that happens with technology rollout, right? It just in the
Hmm.
past, that's always happened. But we adapt our skills to fit the technology into it. And I think that's what we're exploring with generative AI right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, because not only do you have the AI generative and the information AI can produce, but you really want to mind bend what kind of AI will AI produce, and
Yes.
and what does
Yeah.
that look like? And then we have, I haven't researched this, but you hear the government approving lab grown meat now for human
I
consumption. I
know.
mean,
Yeah.
what is this world turning into?
Yeah. It's all
It's
fake. Yeah. Well, again, that was like that background that I was showing you, the of the
mhm,
tree. Like, there's a chaos to nature. It's not
right,
uniform. It's, it's chaotic. We don't really know where it's going to go. And that to me is sort of the essence of creativity in life and what it means to be separate than a machine. Because the machine, while using, it's using algorithms, it's using predictions. So part of my background is in statistics, applied statistics and research methods.
sure,
And I'm kind of a cynic when it comes to stats and numbers because I see how it's put together and it's
yep,
not so much how it's calculated. My comment isn't so much on the algorithm itself. That's interesting. That's cool. I don't really understand how it works, to be honest, from a mathematical point of view. I'm not that smart. But where I do find it interesting, and especially in research, is what they're counting as data. What is fed into the system that it uses? So
right,
that to me is sort of that baseline. And right now, I mean, like a lot of it's just general stuff from the internet, and
hmm
it obviously has that tone when it returns content. But this, I'm curious about in the future where the smaller open source models will go. So not the large language models that ChatGPT is based on and Meta and all, the big ones are based on, but the small language models that use millions of parameters instead of billions, and you
hmm
can run them on a laptop.
right.
Those can be very, very easily fine-tuned and trained to a very specific domain. So that I'm really curious about, and that's where I think it will start to blur to your question, like those 2 points of how it's getting hard to tell one from the other.
Well, and again, even using chat GPTs to create your own GPTs, those GPTs can run remotely and, just log
Actually,
into APIs. And, that's
yes.
one of the things that I'm working on right now, or I created a GPT called Plumber's Pen. I don't know if I talked to you about that, but
No, I think so actually, but
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So anyway, basically just, I just would type in something like, I am looking for articles that I could write on plumbing this week. Give me some ideas. Or not even plumbing, just I need some ideas for
Or just any,
articles.
yeah,
And it will say, "Oh, here's some great articles around plumbing for you," because it knows I've trained it to be a
exactly.
plumbing
Yes.
copywriter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is interesting that you had talked about how the human um, contextualized and conceptual writings and things are going to become more rare and
Hmm.
maybe even more valuable because it's like, oh, you want me to write? Well, that's going to cost you a lot more,
Exactly.
right?
Yes, exactly. Because of the sheer amount of time. Like
Yeah.
it's if I tell ChatGPT to write me an article, it does it in a matter of seconds. The article that I just published on LinkedIn. I don't know exactly when I started it. I started one ideas, then I would move on and be like, this idea isn't going anywhere. Let me try another one and work on that for a while. And I would bounce ideas past ChatGPT here and there,
hmm
um, but nothing really stuck. So it took a long time to get what ended up being a rather short article out online. That whole creative process is a lot of back and forth. Then I'm a little rusty. I mean, I haven't been in the publishing and
Right.
writing in a little while, but it really kind of illustrated that point. And to your point, yeah, if someone's going to want authentically human generated content, which, like I was saying, the article I wrote and the one it rewrote are very different than one another. The style, the diction,
hmm
everything about it is very, very different to the point where it kind of made me uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah, and now to your point though, it's interesting because one asset I do see in it is like those GPTs that you were talking about. So I created one for the business that Eric and I are doing called AID, the AI Instructional Designer, and so I put all of our content into a GPT so I can ask the GPT, knowing what you know about this company, help me write some copy or give me an idea about how we could use this in this context and stuff. And then for that, it's actually a great start. Like,
Right.
the blank page it can be quite daunting to just like, oh gosh, where do I start? Like, at least GPTs and ChatGPT, generative AI in general, at least gives a place to start. And that's one area I do see it being of great value. Kind of like you were saying with the plumber's idea. It's like, okay, give me some ideas for this. And if it knows your context, those ideas are actually germane and usable.
Yeah, and it came back and it made an outline and
Hmm.
and then I said, "Would you I like Article 4. Go ahead and write that out and include my contact information. And it wrote it out
Hmm.
and said, so for your plumbing needs, reach out to, and it put my number, which I'm not a plumber, but the idea was
Yeah.
it just used my information, wrote it out, and made it. Now, here's what's really interesting that I believe will happen. If you take content written by an AI and use it for and tell it, I'm trying to create content that would be search engine optimized for plumbers in my area
Hmm.
or for me to outrank other plumbers in the area. Now you have an AI that is writing your um, your context, your
Hmm.
information in a way that it believes Google is going to rank better, which may give you an advantage because
Right.
you
Yeah.
may have ChatGPT may be the best search and optimizer out there because it thinks like a computer. And
Exactly.
even
Yes.
though SEO is, and Google says, well, it's about the content and it's about how you position the content and the more information you give, the better you can rank. But at the end, it's really just a computer
Hmm.
going through the data, looking for certain words and structures, and their AI can be very advanced, which is great. But if I have an AI writing content for that AI to say rank me higher because I'm writing it the way you want to
Yeah.
see it, that could be a huge advantage. So
For sure.
writing content
Yeah.
by an AI for an internet usage
Right.
must be pretty valuable.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting too. You were talking about like, training the AI, right? And how the content that it produces is noticeably different than what a human will produce, right? So,
Mhm.
I was listening to this lecture from the Turing Institute. I was just looking it up on the future of generative AI, and in it, the lecturer was talking about they were curious, so they used humans to train an AI model, and then they use the content that the model produced to train the next model. And they were curious how many iterations they could go. And I
Mhm.
think it was 4 or 5. And he said after that it was complete gibberish.
Right.
Complete gibberish.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and I thought that was interesting. It reminded me of the old magnetic tapes. If you tried to copy them too many, there's so much noise got introduced into the system, so to speak, into the data that it couldn't the machine couldn't tell one from another, but a human can. It's like,
Right.
no, this we don't need this information, we need that information. So that is one. Because of that very thing, it can't go too far. It gives me sort of to our point about um, the valuable of human writing and human creativity.
Hmm.
I hope that stays the same for quite some time. That only a few more iterations and that of AI teaching itself and it turns to gibberish without
Yeah.
our assistance.
Well, it kind of reminds me of those post-apocalyptic movies where you have the world here, and you divide the world into the human content world where everything is
Yeah.
human built, human design, human structure, and then you have this other. Those are the AIs over there, the people who are cybernetic, those who
Hmm.
believe in AI, and they could live in a completely different world where everything is automated and AI
Yeah.
curated, and then you have these like, well, I would rather live over here in the real world where it's real human, and then other people are, no, I like when
Yeah.
you're at the augmented and everything's all, and it's
Yeah.
all, wow, that could be a whole movie right there.
Some people like I think it's true even now. Like I see it with some friends and family. Like some people really like to be connected, right? They live in the city, they have their internet, they have their watch, they have this, they have all this kind of wearable tech, right? Other people prefer to drop all of that and just stay like, I mean, I don't like for me personally, I don't wear the watches because I don't know if like I don't need it tracking all my vitals all the time. I don't for me it's too even for me it's too much information, let alone the privacy concerns or anything like that. It's do I really need to constantly monitor my heart rate? Like or is that just going to make me paranoid the more I see that number? So I see, yeah, right now there's people that kind of split. There's others that, I'd much rather spend an hour or two completely disconnected and in nature versus actually I'd really like to go to Meow Wolf and be completely immersed in like all the tech and all the stuff that's going on. And I think there's definitely an equilibrium between there. And I do think we find our human side in nature and in silence. Because one of the things like so Eric he did a podcast earlier about empathy in AI, which is which is an interesting aspect because one of the unique things that separates humans from the computer is the computer is mimicking emotions. It doesn't actually feel them. A human does. And it, like, personally, in my sort of quest as an instructional designer and in my experience doing this, I think it's the emotional characterization and emotional element of learning and how it influences learning is the least discussed and the least appreciated aspect of instructional design. A lot of it's on how does this technology influence? How can we use this? What's the proper way, or what's the the optimal best practice for, say, using AI in a particular kind of lesson? Like if we're going to teach history, what's the optimal way? A lot of it's focused on that, but for me, the part that's left out a lot, especially in online learning, is the emotional connection that students have to the teacher, to the content, to each other, and it's hard to get that. And AI is noticeably like unempathetic. Like it's fake. At least it comes across to me that way. It's clearly just trying to mimic and it doesn't understand. And I don't honestly think it ever could because it's a machine.
Right. It's never going to actually feel what
Yeah,
heartbreak feels like. It can mimic those words,
exactly.
but yeah,
Exactly. So
yeah,
there's talk like about using it like in therapy. And honestly, I think that's the last place that
correct.
it's, you know what I mean? Because of that very reason. As soon as someone knows that they're talking to a computer, they're like, this is the fundamental problem. Like, I feel like no one listens to me. And instead of listening to me, they put me in front of a computer. Like, that's just going to amplify the problem, I feel, for a lot of people, not solve it.
Yes. If you're
Yeah.
feeling depressed and down and
Mm-hmm.
suicidal, and you don't want some GPT saying, "Well, here's the
No.
top 5 reasons you should stay alive." You know,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That's the kind of thing it would produce. And
right.
that's obviously meaningless to a person who needs actual, help and information and is looking for someone to talk to. And of course, like, coupled with that, there's a lot of discussion lately about loneliness in our society. And now that is often linked to social media and technology. And I don't see chatbots helping with that. I see it aggravating it, if anything, if anything.
No, I agree. And not to switch subjects so
Hmm.
quickly, but that brings up some really good points on the topic where you initially talked a little bit about AI in education.
Absolutely.
And I, so when I talked to you, I was talking to you about the AI course that I had created for students to teach them how to learn to use
Yes.
AI properly, ethically, in a way that would still help them get better grades, get through the course material more quickly, better understand the information. And I believe that that is key and
Hmm.
important to do. Now, I've sent a few hundred people to that course to sign up for it, and so far
Oh, that's all.
nobody's done it, which is interesting. So obviously, I've got to
Yeah.
work on my conversion, see what's going on with the funnel there. But here's the
Hmm.
surprising thing that, well, actually, it's not so surprising. I do have someone in my networking group whose son was kind of having trouble in high school and just
Hmm.
uninterested. And I said, well, have him go through my AI lessons, and it could
Yeah.
teach him how to use AI to get the information more quickly, understand exactly
Hmm.
what he needs to be taught, and then take that information and be able to create sample test questions and things to help him better prepare, all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. She said, that sounds great. That would be awesome. I'd love to do that. She sent it to her, she gave it to her son. Her son
Hmm.
logged in, and I could see the progress on the course. And, you have this circle,
Oh,
right?
okay.
It's been
Yeah.
about 50%. He stopped. And I asked
Interesting.
her, I said, well, he was doing it, and then he kind of stopped. Do what happened? And she said, I don't know. She said, maybe I'll go through it. But my son was looking at it and he was excited about it.
Hmm.
And he went to school and he was telling some friends about it. And the friend said something along the lines of, oh, yeah, that's cool and all, but check this out. If you just do this, this, and this, it just gives you the answer, right? And so it
Yeah.
was like, oh, I don't need all that stuff. I just
Yeah.
use this and I don't even have to think at all.
Yep.
And there's a real danger in
Yes.
that. And so if you're under the guise that, oh, I've banned AI in school, so therefore my students aren't using it, you
Oh,
need
yeah.
to open your eyes
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's like telling
Yeah.
the boys back in the 60s not to smoke in the.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course they're going to use it. Like it's such an advantage that Of course they're going to use it. Like it would make not it would honestly in the workplace, like it's the same kind of thing. It's such an advantage, it makes no sense not to use it.
Hmm.
In some capacity. The question I think really is what capacity? Where is that line where it's like it's you're still authentic, you're still learning, you're not actually cheating on the exams and getting the straight answer out of it. There's a process involved.
Yeah, it was just crazy, and I just thought, when are when are schools going to stop saying, okay, you can't use it, and start saying, we need to intervene here and we need to get the kids
Yeah.
using it the right way?
Actually, if you'll permit a little bit of a longer answer to that, it brings
Yes.
up, okay, if it brings up what I was just writing about when I was talking about that LinkedIn post, right? So there's a principal in instructional design. It was actually an article that was written 30 years ago this year, Richard E. Clark. And the title of the article kind of says it all. He says, Why Media Will Never Influence Learning. And then the rest of it is media, 1994 is when this was written. So media at the time was pretty limited, but the point he was making is very similar to the point that you're just making. He's like, it's not so much about the technology and the specific can and can't do's of a particular technology. The role of educators and instructional designers is what is the instructional context around that technology. So regardless of what it is, it could be Google, it could be images at the time, like internet video was like a big thing, right? So it doesn't matter what the technology is. What is that instructional design? Which is the question you're asking. It's like, well, so how do we bring this into schools in a way where we're teaching kids, not just, and adults for that matter, not just how to get the answers out of it, because at that point, if we're going to use it that way, it's going to diminish our ability to find our own answers. It's going to diminish our creative thinking, and it's going to diminish our ability to do that. As a there is, however, a way to do it to generate more ideas and actually enhance our own creativity, which is what your course is about. It's like, okay, yes, you could just answer, the straight answer and give me the answer, but the conversational format of a back and forth opens up a different kind of learning that has enormous potential. And I'm really curious where that goes. But we don't see that if it's just banned from the classroom because students will cheat. Honestly, if students are cheating, to me, this is more about the assignment than it does the tool. The assignment needs to change so ChatGPT can't cheat. And that's authentic assignments
Yeah. Oh, no, I
or
agree
authentic assessment.
100%.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I mean, it has to go with how
Hmm.
is the information being delivered, and the honestly, I feel like the days of here's the information, answer these questions,
Yes.
that's going to have to
That,
end,
yeah.
because if it does, then you're just now
Hmm.
what you were talking about and kind of what we were talking about when we first met there was, what about giving the children opportunity to ask AI just questions and go down the path that
Exactly.
they're most interested in.
Yes.
Obviously, we have to make sure that the information that they're getting is correct. But then again, going to the metaphysical
Hmm.
kind of realm, what is correct? Everything that's correct is based on the information that we think we
Exactly.
know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So, like, there is the bias of the AI, of the generative AI, comes from a lot of the training, and like the Turing Institute lecture he pointed out. Like, for example, because they're training on the internet, like, where is most of the internet? Well, it's in English-speaking Western countries, so that's the lens through which it looks. Um, but what's interesting about that
Yeah, I was going to
is,
say, just as an
Mhm.
example, I have, let's say, I have a headache.
Mhm.
What would Google suggest that I take? What could I take to help with my headache?
Mhm.
Google may come back with Tylenol, Advil, aspirin.
Mhm.
Would it come back with some of the herbal remedies that you might get in Eastern
Yes,
state? You know,
that's a really good question. Yeah. And so to your point about, and this is where I think it really offers that learning, the ability to learn and see what's really going on, is so let's say we're taking that as an example, and let's say the students like describe their symptoms and it sends back, oh, take these things. So then the question for the student, and this is where instructional design comes in, is okay, are you going to take that at face value and just go with it, or how does this sit with you? Do you want more information? Do you want to see what other alternatives are? Like, I see people not just with AI, but with Google do the same thing. Instead of trying to think it through, and what's their answer? How do they might solve the problem? Okay, I have a headache, for example. what have I taken in the past just for me that might have helped? People will just type it straight into Google and get an answer and just go with it. And that short circuits any sort of creative thinking, not creative thinking, critical thinking that might happen there. And so it becomes kind of a back and forth. So what I recommend with AI from an instructional design point of view is that sort of step back from it and say, okay, how am I using this? How is the way I'm using this affecting how I'm thinking about things? And that sort of metacognitive process, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter with the technology, it becomes a really interesting tool because as we students, educators, anybody, as we start to use it that way, that's how we learn. Oh, this is where it can fit in. This is where it doesn't fit in. This is the information it gives me that is clearly biased toward, like, say, Western medicine. Is a good example of that. And like, how do you get it to get into other topics? Is it even possible? That's sort of the learning process, and then it'll fit. Like, where does this fit in my world as a student, as a teacher, as a faculty member? How can I use this properly? It's through trial and error.
Right, and again, it kind of comes back to the answers that it's going to give is based on
Mm-hmm.
the answers that we send it,
Mm-hmm.
or that it collects looking at information. Basically, from what I understand, they'll open up the web and say, "Go query the web," and then bring in new data so
Mm-hmm.
answer questions more effectively. But then we're back to the answers that it comes back with are only the answers that it would give it, and
Mm-hmm.
we even in a scientific community can't decide are carbs good, are they bad,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's a good
So
example. Yeah.
so it's like
Yeah.
for years, oh, smoking's not addictive. Oh no, smoking
Mm-hmm.
is addictive. Oh, well, this is and it's just
Yeah.
like as things change, people really are going to need to hang on to those critical thinking abilities, not
Right.
just question answer,
Right.
question answer. Unfortunately, even with AI, you can mimic certain things. Instead of saying, "What is the answer to this question?" you say,
Mm-hmm.
"Tell me your thoughts on the subject based on this information," and
Right.
the AI will spit out something that sounds somewhat humanish. You
Mm-hmm.
can switch some things up a little bit, and now it just came up with the answer that you creatively thought, quote unquote, because it wasn't you at
Mm-hmm.
all. But I've seen that where tell me, and what I did is I did
Uh-huh.
something where I went to and I think I gave this example last time we talked was Tom Sawyer, and I said,
Yes.
tell me
Yes.
what lessons I should learn from Tom Sawyer
Mm-hmm.
and why they're important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it told me this is the lessons that you learn from it, and this is why they're important in your life. Okay, thanks. Now I know. And it was, but
Yeah.
I never, so even those kind of answers, it could spit out and
Mm-hmm.
mimic some kind of a thoughtful process that really you didn't put
Yeah.
anything into.
Well, and one of the things actually, in terms of like the limitations and stuff, is I've been using, like, there's for ChatGPT 4, there's a plugin, AI Scholar or something like that, and it says it gives you access to these academic articles so you can do research in various industries. But what I've noticed is actually that's not the case. It gives access to the publicly available information from the articles, meaning the abstract and sometimes the citations. That's it. It doesn't actually read the article, the whole thing. And in academia, that matters. Like the abstract has some information, but a lot of what I'm looking for is in the body of the article itself, and those aren't fed in to the training system because they're behind a paywall. I mean, it makes sense why they're not fed into the general one.
Right.
And I wonder sometimes. I know that ChatGPT is making more partnerships with various groups. I forget which one. Hugo Mifflin, I think, was one recently, and I gather that's going to take all their articles because they're a huge publisher in the academic world and add them to the training set. And at that point, it could be really interesting for like information retrieval, like your Tom Sawyer example, right? So if I gave it like 50, if I'm doing a dissertation, let's say, and I have to read 150 articles on this subject, that's a lot of reading. But if I could give them to a chat GPT or a GPT, I should say, and then have it recall and I can query questions and stuff, now it becomes a bigger learning tool. But to your point, I'm curious about something. The um, the examples that it gave you, this is why Tom Sawyer should be relevant to your life. Were they accurate? Was it, yes, that I can see how I could take that away and apply it to my life? Or was it just kind of like it was guessing out of thin air?
It was actually pretty good. I mean,
Oh, okay.
it was talking
Cool.
about friendship and loyalty and the importance of,
Okay.
so it was like, yeah,
Yeah. It
you can pawn
surprises.
that off as your own. Yeah, I came up with
Hmm,
this.
I like it. Yeah.
So then we noted go to the question again. It comes back down to like you're saying, it comes back to the teaching style.
Yes.
If we are sending them off and saying, here, go do your homework, they may
Hmm.
never have to think. If we sit in a
Yeah.
room and we talk about it and they have to come
Yeah.
up with answers on the spot after reading together,
Yeah.
now they can't just go,
Yes. They
right?
can't. Yeah. It's coming from their own head. Exactly. I think there's a model that the experiential Kolb's experiential learning model, I think, really applies to this. I was using it in that article. That's why it's kind of on my mind. But it involves that. So there's this, there's a cycle. There's a concrete experience, and there's a reflection on that experience, and there can be discussion. But a lot of it working with simulations it breaks it down into three basic steps. Is one, sort of a briefing. Whole class, small groups, you come together and just talk about, okay, we're going to use ChatGPT to research to do whatever task it happens to be. Um, Before you use it, though, just write out your own thoughts, not graded, just brainstorm. And I usually recommend that people don't use anything digital at that point. Pen, paper, whiteboard, something, because it's more kinesthetic. You're moving around, especially with groups. You can write it down,
Yeah.
you can circle things. Um, Brainstorm it out. What do you think the answer is? What do you, just based on what you know, there's no wrong answer here. Then start using the tool. And then, and this is what you were just saying, after that's done, this could be one day, this could be over multiple days. After that's done, the whole class live, they come together and compare notes. Okay, how did you think it was going to work? What did you think it was going to be? How did it actually go? What did you learn by comparing those two things to each other and contrasting? It's like, oh, this is how I thought it was going to work. It didn't work that way. I wonder why. And that's where that learning takes place. But because, to your point, because it's an authentic assessment, it's that whole class discussion. It's much harder. You can't really cheat on that when you're called on by the teacher to answer something right in the spot. It'll be really clear if you've done it or not, so to speak.
Yeah,
But it
exactly.
also, a whole class discussion also helps people who have done it but might be shyer about communicating it and talking up in a class. When other people are able to share, it gets that discussion moving and flowing and things like that.
And one of the things that I really like about AI is when you ask it certain things like math questions. Now, for me,
Hmm.
I had a very weird experience with math.
Oh, interesting.
Growing up, I just did not understand what the heck are you talking. I don't get it, right?
Hmm.
And one, and this is from the time I'm a kid to the time I think I was about 21 years old. And
Hmm.
I mean, it was like fractions and decimals and algebra and pre-algebra and, getting into geometries. Those, as I went through that, it was just like, I'm not understanding this language
Hmm.
that we call math, right?
Yes.
One night, and I remember this night. I remember where I was. I remember what it felt like laying there in my bed. I remember what the room
Ah.
looked like. I remember everything about it. All of a sudden, I had this thing enter my head, and I was thinking about these algebraic equations
Hmm.
where you have 2x in the parentheses
Oh, yeah, those.
and times where kind of thing,
Hmm.
and equals 40 or something. And I
Hmm.
thought, how in the world can that equal 40? I don't understand this. And I don't see what it's doing. And of course, then there's this flow that you have to go through in order
Right.
to this methodology. And if you do it in this
Hmm.
specific order and you apply these certain things, then eventually you'll get it. But what occurred to my mind was all of a sudden I understood, oh, I'm not trying to figure out why it equal. I'm not trying to figure out how it
Hmm.
equals 40. I'm trying to figure out how it equals 40. If that makes sense.
Ah,
It was a different
it
context.
changed your perspective.
Yeah, it does equal
Yeah.
40. I just got to figure out how, not
Yeah.
why it does. And so,
Right.
like, what the
Right. I
heck?
get
And
you.
all of a sudden, so
Yes.
I went into, got out of bed, went to the other room, and I started writing out these algebraic equations, and
Hmm.
started solving them. And then I was putting the numbers back in where the x and the y and the different,
Oh,
variables,
nice.
and solving it. And sure enough, it was coming out correct. I'm like, oh, finally, I understand it, right?
Yes.
And it it took me a minute, and I remember in one of my college math courses, and this was one of my proud moments in my life, where
Hmm.
I'm taking this algebra class, and we're going through pretty a little bit more advanced quadratic equations and some of those kinds of
Hmm.
things. And I get in there and I finish my test, and I'm feeling really good about this test, and I go, wow, I get this now. I went up to the teacher. I think it
Hmm.
was one of the first ones done with
Oh,
this.
nice.
I think it was, I don't know, 20 questions or so. I don't remember. I think it was
Hmm.
about 20 questions. But so I go to the teacher and I said, okay, I'm done. He's like, well, that was fast. And I said, yeah, but he said, you want me to check it real quick for you now? And I said, yeah,
Oh, okay.
absolutely. So he goes through, he's like, yep, that one's right. That one's right. He's just looking at his answers,
Uh-huh.
right? He gets to this one and he's like, oh, this one's wrong. I'm like, no, it isn't.
Oh, interesting.
And he
Okay.
says, no, the answer. I'm like, no, it isn't. I'm like, I know this is right. And he said, well, let me do it again. So he's going through the process. He goes, oh, I forgot to bring this negative over. And
Oh,
he changed his answer and it matched my answer. And I was like,
yeah.
I knew it. And I totally aced this test. Now,
Hmm.
and he said I was the first student in years to, like totally ace 100% on that test without any
Hmm.
problem. So I was very proud of that. But the point I'm trying to make there is if someone had been able to explain that process over and over and over again until I got it, now you could pay a teacher to do that,
Hmm.
or I could write out these equations, use photo math, take a picture of it,
Hmm.
and then photo math will go in and solve the equation for me and then
Hmm.
print out the steps that it did to get there. And you can even have GPTs that could explain step
Yes.
by step the process that you have to go through to get that answer. And maybe after enough times, the student is finally going to go, oh, now I see what they're
Yes.
doing. Where a teacher may not have the patience to sit there for 30 minutes and try to
Yeah.
explain it for an
And
hour
re-explain.
over and over and over.
Hmm.
But these GPTs won't get tired of it. And you're like, nope, don't get it, explain it again. Nope, don't get it, explain it
Absolutely.
again. So you could have AI tutors that could work with you on a particular something you're stuck on
Hmm.
for as long as you want to until it finally makes sense. So something like
Absolutely.
that would be a good tool
Absolutely.
because there's no emotions involved. It's just do it again, do it again. A teacher might be like,
Hmm.
I've done it 100 times. Why don't you understand? Right?
Right. Well, and I'm glad you bring that up because that's a great point, and that's actually something about AI that I'm really excited about because especially for like online, because to your point, the content it's like even if you read it in a textbook, you read it online, or the way it's presented to you is the way it's presented to you, but maybe that way just doesn't click for whatever reason. Like you just needed to change the word. Oh, it's not the why, it's how. So that slight, deviation, all of a sudden everything kind of clicked. And you're right. It takes for a human teacher, just having been a teacher for a long time, like, a class of 30 students, I can't differentiate the lesson 30 different ways. I would definitely like to, because as I would talk to students one on one, I can see and I can feel the reaction. I can see how they change. And I'm like, okay, this isn't clicking. Let me ask them something about themselves. What's your background? What are your hobbies or whatever? And a lot of times, if I can contextualize whatever the material is in something that they already understand, something that they know, whether it's a hobby, um, their major. In my case, I was teaching college composition one, like 101, right? So the very first class freshman. So it was not, oops, it was not one that they volunteered to take, let's say. It was one that they had to take so that
Right.
they could pursue their art degree in something else. So I knew that. I was aware of that. So I could see that if I phrase things in an art in that field, they understood the writing process better. That's really exhausting. However, but I really do think, and I agree with you, that AI, generative AI, has the ability to really change the way that works, to take content written one way and rewrite it, to your point, any number of different ways until it clicks and it won't get tired of it. It may turn to gibberish at one point or another, but they can just hit regenerate.
Right.
And I think that offers a really powerful tool because it can connect to students in a way that, it's not to say faculty can't and don't, but on specific tasks that can make a world of difference and take a lot off the faculty member so that they can focus on the higher order learning and, the larger things like the group discussions that you were talking about, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, you could even train GPT on your background. This
Exactly.
is, I enjoy these sports. I do
Hmm.
these kinds of things. I'm good at math. I'm terrible at spelling. Whatever it is. I mean, you could come
Whatever.
up with a list of 500 questions.
Hmm.
I don't know how much you could sit down and do it in one time, but eventually, if you have an AI that understands you and can take that information and then based on some of the learning models. And
Yes.
one of the things that Eric, talks about is someone who is more action oriented and less,
Ah. Hmm.
right? There's different mindsets that people have going in, and if the Chat GPT can understand, or the GPT,
Hmm.
the AI, whatever it's going to be
Yeah,
down
whatever it's called.
there,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
can understand who you are based on your background, your history, the way you think,
Exactly.
the way you answer questions. Could it then turn around and say, okay, I know how to teach the student pretty much
Hmm.
anything because I know how to deliver the message in a way that this
Exactly.
is going to understand?
I am so glad you brought that up. I am so glad you pointed that out. It connects to a lot of different things. Again, one of the things that I think is least appreciated in learning is motivation. Motivation and like what, especially intrinsic motivation, why, from the student's own perspective, why are they involved? Why are they learning this? What are they hoping to get out of this ultimately? Um, it's not often, especially in online learning, it's not considered because of the amount of time and effort that it creates to take it on to create an online class is just monumental. Like for a college course, we're talking something like 12 weeks at least, and it's with a team of about 3 people to create one class.
Right.
AI shortens that so fast, and that's the tool
Yeah.
that Eric and I are working on is that instructional designer tool for instructional designers and faculty to dramatically shorten that time. But the other aspect of that is yes, especially using that system that Eric talks about, the bank code system, because it's a values based system. So there's some talk about like learning styles, but educators, instructional designers, like we know it doesn't really matter. Like some people say they're a visual learner, auditory learner. It's like, yeah, it's more of a preference, like than anything else. We can adapt to whatever. Ultimately, it's try to give everyone everything. But the way AI can do it is if it's connected like to a value system, something internal, like their personal history, their personal values, how they approach the world, whether they're an action, a nurture, a knowledge, it can dynamically and instantly rewrite content to tune it specifically toward that. And I think that is going to make a dramatically huge, important impact on online learning and online retention because retention online, as you were talking about, a lot of people will get halfway through and stop, or barely even that, and then they drop. But if it's tuned to their way of thinking, their value system, and what motivates them, I think that could really change. And AI is perfect for that. I think honestly, right where it is right now.
Right. And I imagine in the future you're going to have AI, at least what I would envision and my goal would be, in the school process or the process of learning, you're basically absorbing information and regurgitating that information
Hmm.
back as specific answers for some things. Now, when you get into the higher grades, then now it's I want you to write a paper about this subject based on your thoughts and kind of research and go and
Hmm.
learn the thing. And there's a little bit more of that, but even like up through I remember 9th, 10th grade, it was read this science book, answer these questions, and come
Right.
back with answers, right? Well, I feel like AI can shorten that experience to
Yes.
say, look, if you want to watch this 2 hour lecture, you can, but this 2 hour lecture is to really help you understand these 20 different
Right.
answers,
Right.
topics. And it's like, do we need to put the kids through? So kind of backing
Yeah.
up a little bit, there are kids. I don't know. Remember that show back in the day, like Doogie Howser
Oh
MD or
yeah.
something?
Yes, that's right.
Like he was a doctor at 15.
That's like
Getting back to what I was talking about, these kids that are getting into school, and there was a school here in town called Fast Forward, and it was my
oh,
mother,
okay.
in fact, helped create the school that I talked to you about a
Hmm.
little bit.
That's right.
And there was a boy in there who was, like 10 years old, and he was finishing up his high school degree, at 10 years
Hmm.
old, because he had been kind of home taught. And when I say home taught, again, the home, even the home education models, you have some people who, there are some home teaching where they go out and they do things and they experience life and they report on that. And that's really cool stuff. And then there's the other part, which is kind of coming back to what we talked about, which is absorb this information, regurgitate the answers so that you know that you understood that. A math problem is only has one answer, right? So
Right.
that kind of stuff. A science question. It's funny, we go back to the science questions. You can say it only has one answer, but it
Yeah,
doesn't.
but
Because science
yeah,
can't really even agree on what the answers to these questions are. But
yeah,
if this book says that the answer to this question is this, then that's the answer, right? And so when I take a test, I need to understand that. So, my thoughts would be, can we somehow use AI to just get to the crux of the information, help them better understand it more quickly? And look, if it's just, here's the answer to this question, let's get through that as quickly as possible so we can get the students now learning what they want to learn, and exploring and getting into those higher degree types of
yeah,
environments where now you're learning to think more for yourself than just regurgitating answers that other people are telling you that you're
exactly.
supposed to
Yes.
think. And I think AI is going to be a huge tool if students will use it. But then that also begs the question of, do we need AI, or do we just need to somehow find a way to more quickly get that information in children's heads?
Well, that's a good question. Like, so with the rise of like, Google and now AI, we have information at our fingertips like so quickly. So for example, let's take the statistics that I was talking about, right? I don't use it very often. I'm kind of out of it, out of the field for a little while, and I'm by no means a statistician. I'm an applied statistician. So meaning I take the formula and I know how to plug it in. I don't know the why behind the formula. I know it vaguely, high concept, but that's about it.
Right.
Um, so just to be clear, but I don't memorize the formulas. I also have found that I don't necessarily need to remember all the tests that apply to different situations. I can look that up super easily. Importantly, though, I know enough about it in order to be able to ask the right question of whether that be Google or ChatGPT, or generative AI in general, so that when I see the answer, I kind of have my own filter of just through experience of that doesn't sound right, that doesn't sound right, that doesn't sound right. Um, but getting there requires this back and forth, and I think especially where we have classes and courses that emphasize the acquisition of knowledge, and this is what you're talking about with these like, you know, multiple choice kind of stuff. Honestly, I would even argue that those have been obsolete for a while. Like, yes, AI makes it even faster to hack through those things, but I students have ways of doing that. I see them. They'll take a picture of the test, they'll put it online. The professionals will answer it, and then they sell it to each other for like $5 or give it away to each other for $5. I remember in one class, it was at one of those stadium seating kind of halls or whatever, and I could just see that the people in front of me who were right below all had the answers all written down and were just copying them over onto the multiple choice test. And so it's like the acquisition of knowledge really isn't that big of a thing anymore. We all can do that now between Google and ChatGPT. All the knowledge that we want is right there. So the question is, and I think this is what you're getting at, it's more the process of the higher order thinking about the knowledge. How are we evaluating it? How are we applying it? How are we using it creatively? How do we synthesize that information into something new, something that the AI can't predict because it hasn't been done before? We have that ability. I don't really think it does.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah,
it does. It comes down to, if you're just, here's the question, here's the answer, here's the question and answer, you're not learning to think anyway. Which, I've had people talk about that, the system was created to raise soldiers and factory workers,
mm,
not independent thinkers anyway. Now, I try not to get into the politics of that. All I know is there
yeah,
are people, children, I think, that come in to the world with a certain, um, what's the word, affinity to
Hmm.
different subjects and different types of, and
Yes.
if the children are allowed to go down that road and learn more about what interested them than most,
Yes.
we could spit out, spit out. It's a bad word, but
Yeah.
we could we could turn out people who are younger and better at in their field of whatever
Yes.
it is, because that's what they're most passionate about.
Hmm.
They've been allowed to explore that. And then you also brought up an interesting thing where you had said something about the statistical model. And you said, I can take this and I can kind of plug it in. But you had said something like you don't really question, or
Oh, the
you said
why.
you would question something
Hmm.
that if the data came back wonky, you'd be like, I'm going to question that because there's something, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Just from experience, it's like,
yeah,
yeah, that
there's
seems like
something
it
not
fit.
quite right there, right?
Hmm.
And it's interesting when we look at kind of the world we live in. If there are students out there who question the information they're be given, we call those rebels, right? And
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
but
Which
should
is, well, yeah, which to me is kind of wild because isn't that what we're teaching for? I thought that was the point is we're not trying to produce robots. If we were trying to produce a robot, well, we can. We have GPTs now. We don't need to train students this way anymore. They're going to do that job. Like, so I think, yeah, what we're trying to do is, and at least this is what I hear from educators and instructional designers and academics, is we're trying to push students up toward those higher order learning skills, past just the acquisition of knowledge. But in practice, to your point, it's still very much about the mere acquisition of that knowledge and can you just regurgitate that? And one of the things that you brought up that I'm really hopeful that AI, like those GPT tutors that you're talking about, that people can build on their own. Like they can just sign up and build it and customize it on their own. They don't need to be built by other people. And because of that, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this opens up the democratization of learning in a way that hasn't been before. So, for example, like your points, students of any age could start using ChatGPT or generative AI in a combination with Google. I think the two work hand in hand to some degree. Um, Plus, they're just their own experience and interacting with their teachers and friends to pursue areas that they're truly interested in and see where they go and where it takes them. And then those tutors can start linking these topics together in ways that the students might not have even thought. And you're right. I think we'll see, if used that way, I think students will get up to those higher order learning skills much faster than we've ever seen because kids are super adaptable. Like the neuroplasticity of, younger people is so much faster. I don't honestly think we as adults give them enough credit. If we challenge them with something like that, they're going to adapt and learn pretty quick. And I think, honestly, and I'm curious as to whatever anyone else's reaction is to this, but I'm curious if part of the fear is they'll end up better using these tools. They are going to end up being better than us very, very quickly.
right.
And that's kind of threatening in a way. It really is. But I
Yeah,
think it behooves us to start using these tools ourselves and learn it.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I see the same thing, and that's why I feel like this whole education system is going to have to change in
I
some
think,
way.
yeah.
Especially, you nailed it on the head. Like we don't need people who can just regurgitate
Hmm.
answers. We've got AI for that. We've got Google for that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know that you have to have a foundation of certain knowledge in order to pursue other knowledge.
Hmm.
So I fully respect that. I think that is fantastic. And there's good knowledge and good information out there based on study. I mean, you look at technology
Hmm.
and how we look at how fast it grows, but it's always based on the
Hmm.
previous knowledge. It's like that whole butterfly effect. If one
Yes.
had changed 100 years ago, we may be in a totally different space today
Hmm.
now because instead of ones and zeros, it could be.
Right.
So, who knows?
Yeah.
You just don't know how that
Yeah.
foundation. Well, that again comes to a mathematical question, but the way computers process, they could be completely different as well.
Hmm.
So, what kind of world are we looking at when children are set free to kind of study specific
Yeah.
topics on their own from nearly ground zero? They
Yes,
come up with a
exactly.
completely different answer than what science or
Hmm.
technology gives us now.
Which and I'm really excited to see what that is going to look like. Like I'll often say, like just from working in instructional design, all these different theories and being a teacher, I can summarize it down to one thing, and it's like we learn by doing things. We can read, to your point, we can read, we can remember these facts, we can do all that kind of stuff. But quite frankly, we learn when we start doing it and applying it in some sort of context. That like it's like the axiom that will say the best way to learn something is to teach it. That's why. Because it's one thing to have it just kind of sitting in my head and rolling around on my own like narrative up here. It's another thing to have to recontextualize that, rephrase it to teach it to someone else, or otherwise present it to someone else, or use it in a particular context. So that could be ChatGPT, for example, putting it, typing, here's what I think, give me your feedback to ChatGPT or any sort of generative AI is going to produce this interesting conversation. And that's where the learning takes place. It's not in the knowing of the facts, it's in this interaction and the adjustment of everything to adapt to the time. And the advantage of that is we can start doing with very little foundational knowledge, especially if it's not something that's going to cause us harm. Like I wouldn't recommend like jumping into skydiving without doing some background knowledge first. You know what I mean? Like, but in terms of just trying to learn a new skill or seeing where an idea goes, go
Hmm.
for it. Just go for it. Jump into a generative AI or Google, whatever, and just go for it. And you'll learn the knowledge along the way through these AI systems, which is incredibly powerful.
Hmm. No, I agree. I mean, you can't become a doctor, starting at the point of just learn anatomy and give them a scalpel.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
obviously there's a lot more they understand about the human physiology, so they understand how everything operates before you
Hmm.
do that. But the
But
question is, how fast can we get them there?
yes, how fast can we get him there? And I will add to that. So let's say you're going in for surgery, and that surgeon, as they're standing there with that scalpel, says, "Oh, this is the first surgery. Everything I've done before has been book knowledge."
Right.
What is going to be reaction to?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, right.
wait,
Yeah.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's one thing. It's one thing to learn it in the head cognitively. It's another thing to actually start practicing it, and there's a different skill set involved. That's what I mean by we learn when we're doing. When we're doing it, it sinks into a different,
Yeah.
more intuitive way of doing it. And that's where, and I think the other side of that, that's where we are as humans, is that intuitive. We're going to do this and take action with it. Where generative AI can really fill in is that other side to help with that background knowledge, anatomy. What is the important information I should know here? It might be able to at least give a good starting point.
Yeah. And
Certainly better
simulate.
than a generic Google search. Sorry.
Right. No, you're right.
Hmm.
Simulating AI is going to be really cool at simulating different types of science experiments, surgeries.
Hmm.
I mean, imagine having an AI type human with some kind of randomized problems that you get.
Yes.
And he's like,
Yes.
I performed this surgery like 200 times with
Yeah.
all number of kind of things. Like there's a fly in the air, or
Yeah.
there's a
Yes.
like
Yes.
the
Yeah.
guy wasn't really asleep. I mean,
Hmm.
you never know what kind of random things can come up. But the more that AI has prepared them for that,
Yes.
by giving them these situations to go in and practice in some absurd types of things. Okay, now you're going to perform the surgery as though you're flying in a helicopter
Yeah. Yeah.
while while being shot at.
Uh-huh.
Right? I would rather have that. Doctors like this is easy. Like.
Hmm. Well, and that's a great point too, because simulations, like one of the things I've been kind of seeing with AI, you take Meta for example, right? It's funny because it looks just like these glasses that I'm wearing now. They partnered with Ray-Ban for these glasses, but these pieces are cameras, so
Mhm.
it's stereo vision. It knows what you're looking at, and the AI could use augmented reality over the lenses, so you're seeing a virtual world plus the real world behind it.
Yep.
And they're saying like you could play tennis against your wall. It knows, it can recognize your motions, but the important thing is with the AI, it can dynamically on the fly adjust it. It's not a pre-programmed game or whatever. It's adjusted to your point, so it can make these different situations. And I'm really excited to see what that's going to happen with simulations, because there's a lot of really interesting ones, like in the medical field and all this kind of stuff. A lot of these different simulations, but they're pre-programmed. They're kind of pre-scripted events because again, it can't yet be done that way. But with
Mhm.
AI, it could dynamically adjust along the way, and like you said, give you all these scenarios. And then you're doing, right? You're learning while doing, but you're not causing harm because it's a simulation. Like, right? I'd much rather a pilot crash the flight simulator 1,000 times and the real plane no times.
Right.
You know, like that's the idea. But
Yeah.
that is a really interesting area, and I'm really excited to see that where that can go, especially with the overlap of AR, augmented reality, into that. And I
Mhm.
like we're seeing the trends and the way they're going. I see a lot of predictions in 5 years. I think by the end of 2024, it's going to be noticeably different.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, noticeably different.
You see
Yeah.
so many new tools coming out too,
Mm-hmm.
for both educators and students and business, and they're, who knows what's going to be a year from
Yeah.
now. And again, it really kind of goes to how are we going to adapt to this? The internet came out and they said, well, there goes, millions of jobs or whatever,
Yeah.
which launched Amazon and provided millions of
Uh-huh.
jobs. So
Yeah.
yeah, where is this going to be? I love talking about this stuff, and I love what I really want to do is try to get you and Eric and as many other people in this industry that have these same interests kind of
Mm-hmm.
talking about this and start looking at the instructional design and
Yeah.
how are we going to change the education system in a way that's going to benefit each
Mm-hmm.
individual student better than what we can do without AI.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So that's kind
That
of
would
my
be great. That
that's
would
my
be
goal.
excellent. Because that system, whether we're talking K-12 or higher ed, is a juggernaut of a
Hmm.
system. Like,
Yep.
you know what I mean? Like it has been around for hundreds of years and has, you know, there's been one thing after another. Oh, this is going to change it completely. The first, so just interestingly, where instructional design came from, um, when people actually started looking at, well, how can we use technology and media for learning, was in
Hmm.
World War II. And it came from the reel-to-reel films, right? So the whole thing was, oh wait, we can train soldiers with reel-to-reel films. We don't have to actually train them. They'll just watch movies, right? Well, they discovered that didn't work, and
Right.
so that led to the further question: okay, well, how can we use this brand new technology, film, to train, right? Well, it's led to the entire field ever since. And each time, whether it's the internet, whether it's smartphones, television, they were talking about this with television, they say it's going to completely change the education system, and it's still here. So again, that system is quite a juggernaut. But the one thing that's different about AI, generative AI in particular, versus say the internet itself or the smartphones and mobile learning and how that rise is generative AI is moving so much faster. Like
Yep.
this was only launched like a year ago.
Right.
I was like March 2023 when it first kind of started really coming
Right.
out. So we're still so new, and yet like on LinkedIn, you can see like on their news column, you can see it affecting the various industries one after another, and we're only a few months in. So
Right.
I'm curious as to that system and how it's gonna withstand that. And by banning it and by trying to ignore it and by focusing only on how it can be used for cheating is it's not going to help that system stay around. It's not going to help it be relevant
Yeah.
because
You're missing
yeah,
the point.
they're missing the
Your
point.
concern.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The question really should be, which is what you're asking, how can we best use this new tool to encourage learning in a general
Yeah.
sense? Yeah, for everybody.
If you could wave a magic wand and just put a thought out there, and maybe you're still trying to understand it yourself, but if there was one thing you've noticed in the education system that we could change tomorrow across the nation, what would that look like?
They have got to start connecting it to values. So this is a longer rant, so I'll keep it short. But as a teacher and as an instructional designer, this is something I find. My comment is particularly about contextualizing higher education. That's most of my experience. Good teachers connect with you on an emotional level. They always do. But it's very difficult to do that as a teacher with the system that we work in. I want to be compassionate toward a student, but at the same time, there's accreditation standards. There's all these rules and systems in place that I have to follow, which run counter to my natural intuition as a teacher to try to help a student, because maybe that student is going to require longer than 8 weeks to learn a topic, for example, 16 weeks, whatever it is, right? It's all compartmentalized. Um, when students ask, why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why am I learning this? The answers that's almost all often given to them has something to do with the job market and their career. Well, that doesn't resonate with a lot of students. It just doesn't. They're like, yeah, that's great. I don't care about that. Like, I mean, like they do, but they don't. Like their value system is different. And this is kind of to your
Mhm.
point earlier about like what Eric was talking about, right? So that value system to an action, maybe career, and I'm going to be big in the world. I'm going to be famous. I'm going to do all this stuff. Maybe that's something that they're on that they like. But a nurturer, which is my first letter, doesn't approach the world that way. I don't, money is not my primary motivator. It's a necessity, but it's not a primary motivator. My motivator is more like relationship
Mhm.
based, right? Schools right now do not address any of those differences at all. Instead, they're focused on the cognitive differences. And as a result, they lose a lot of students. They lose a lot of students who just are not interested. So if I could wave that magic wand and change something, it would be to change education so that it becomes a value proposition more than just money, more than career. And honestly, I think the whole system, that's a big question for that system. I don't know if even they know the answer to that.
Right.
Beyond career and money, what is the value they're offering?
Right.
Yeah.
It's I look at futuristic shows like Star Trek, and
Hmm.
that brings up one of the episodes I watched where they found these guys floating in space who'd been frozen for
Oh, interesting.
400 years,
Hmm.
and this was Star Trek Next Generation, and they were in cryostasis because they were rich and or whatever, kind of
Hmm.
thing. So of course, one of the guy comes back, and the only thing he cares about is what's the stock market done? I must be really rich by now,
Yeah.
and he has no clue that there is no stock market. There's no money. They don't,
Yeah.
everything's recycled, and they just,
Hmm.
they'll throw their garbage into the thing, and it'll reatomize it and spit out a turkey dinner. Like, yeah,
Right.
you don't need money anymore. And then he was,
Yeah.
well, then what's the point of living? And
Exactly. It's like, okay, so we have to reframe. The value system is different. Yeah, it needs to be reframed. Yep.
exactly. So, and I think Captain Jean-Luc Picard, his answer
Hmm.
was, what we don't pursue money now. What we pursue is uh, basically human development, human growth, being the best
Hmm.
that we can become in whatever subject we want.
Yes.
And whether it's the arts,
Hmm.
poetry, science, math,
Yes. And
and I
there
thought,
are students that they have a mastery mindset, and that's exactly how they approach whatever topic. I'm just going to
yep,
master that. It doesn't necessarily connect to a career which, quite frankly, might not exist when they graduate.
right.
You
So,
know?
anyways, yeah,
Yeah.
right. I'm going to be an English major, right?
It's
Right.
like it's a great skill to have, but it doesn't necessarily connect.
Yeah, and especially again,
Yeah.
you have GPTs that'll start writing things for you,
Exactly.
grammatically correct, no spelling, may not
Hmm.
be humanized, but if you're becoming if you're an English major so that you can write copy,
Hmm.
that's awesome. You better start learning how to
Yeah.
use AI and how you can integrate your
Yeah.
English major into a synthetic world.
Hmm.
But,
Well, in because AI uses natural language, I was an English major, my undergraduate's in English, and it was one of those things that I'm like, yeah, this did not help me prepare for a career of any kind, but it did help me prepare very well for a master's and doctorate
Mhm.
because writing and research was not a problem. When, like in my master's program, I remember some students, they were like, oh my gosh, it's a 10-page paper. That's so daunting. I'm like, that's our average paper in undergrad and English major. Like, you know what I mean? So it prepared me
Mhm.
in that way, but I knew when I graduated, I'm like, this is not going to connect to any career. And that was in 2001.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? Like, but it has formed that kind of basis of knowledge for everything else. But it changes the nature of, okay, well, what was the degree for? And the fact that it costs like 70, 80 grand, like, is that worth it? Or can I do that with an AI and get the same kind
Mhm.
of skill set, to your point? And that's a very good question. But I
Yeah.
do see, because of natural language, there is an opportunity for liberal arts majors to be interacting with AI. So for example, like if someone's a art history major, I I'm willing to bet that they're going to be able to prompt Midjourney way better than I can because I don't know art history.
Right.
Yeah. So I'll be curious as to what people's experiences with that.
Well, and that's kind of the whole point with the English major is it doesn't prepare you for career. It's more about pursuing an interest that you have and
Mm-hmm.
being the best you can and fully developing yourself in that
Mm-hmm.
field because you want to, not because it's about,
Yeah.
you know. So imagine all the young adults in this world being able to pursue what they're most interested in,
Mm-hmm.
not because of the money, but because they can
Because they can.
and
Yeah.
they can do it more quickly because the
Mm-hmm.
information is. So
And
then it's
cheaply too.
yeah, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
just a question of how quickly can we keep information loaded into this AI, and who's going to monitor this to make sure
Yes.
the information going in is correct. Otherwise, you're
Yeah.
going to end up with gibberish.
Yes. I know, right? And it's interesting because it's like it's honestly it's kind of like statistics in many ways, which it makes sense because they're using that for these models, I guess. But my argument with stats is, well, it doesn't really matter what math you use. It's only as good as the data you put into it.
Right.
If your research methods are terrible or biased from the start, then I don't care what types you use. The whole thing is just nonsense after that. But I think that's the same kind of thing with these generative AI models. It really depends on what they're learning from as to what they're going to produce. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that the future of that isn't so much, at least in my domain, so to speak, as education and instructional design. It seems like they might have better applicability when they're tuned to a very specific area and given specific set of instructions and training materials, not just general internet knowledge, which might be good for like a general foundation, but to actually tune it on whether it's one of the small language models or smaller language models or
Mm-hmm.
fine tuning so that it gives answers that are actually domain specific and sound like a professional and an experience in that field. That still requires, to a point, the point we were talking about earlier, that still requires a human to train it. And now
Right.
but that could be the individual person. That can be you as the student training your own teacher of how you want it how you want it to give you answers, what do you want it to know. And that's the cool thing about the GPTs and other things like that. I think the democratization of learning, like we can train our own teachers, we can create our own little tutors and teachers very easily
Mm-hmm.
and allow us to master really kind of any content domain if we
Right.
give it the right information
Right.
to begin
As
with,
long as
if
it's
we give
giving
it
you the
that.
right information. Yep. And that reminds me of when I was talking to you about the they asked an AI tool to create what was it, like a barrier or something between first class and coach, or one of those little
Oh,
walls or
interesting.
something,
Yeah.
or maybe it was a wall that goes inside the plane for structural
Hmm.
soundness, and they said we need this to be stronger and lighter, and they let an AI tool run away with it, and the AI was able to develop something that was stronger and lighter than anything anyone had ever produced, but it had to be 3D printed,
Ah.
using the alloy,
Uh-huh.
but it was more structurally sound and yet lighter by using specific angles and scaffolding and
Hmm.
how they're going to create their, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And but the question there is who input the data into it in order to teach it what it needs to know
Right.
to to come up with this.
Yeah.
That's what we may be in danger of losing if people are relying more and more on just taking past information.
Hmm.
The engineer needs to understand why the math works in order to put
Hmm.
that into the system to create the output that it's
Right.
looking for. And so education, it's not that I think AI can replace some
Hmm.
jobs, or at least people who are know how to use AI are going to replace people that
Yes.
don't know how to use
Yeah, I
AI.
think that's a good way of saying it. Yeah.
But we've got to figure out how do we keep the information, the core concepts and technologies and information safe so
Hmm.
we don't just duplicate ourselves AI after AI and lose the fundamentals
Yes.
that got us started. So there,
Well, and it's interesting you say that because I think it brings back to how we started our conversation, which was human generated content is going to be a thing of value, right? When Jason Miller said that at the conference, I was like, yes, I think so, because it's noticeably different. I'm starting to see it. Like AI images are like not so much Midjourney, but DALL-E 3. I mean, it has a certain style that it
Mhm.
follows. It's quickly identifiable.
Yeah.
just like an individual person would be. A person's style would be, oh yeah, so that's whoever, I'm blanking on on an
Yeah.
artist
Right.
name at the moment, of course,
Yeah.
but something along those lines. But the reason it has a style, to your point, is it's learning from us, and it doesn't understand what it's doing. I think that's an important
Right.
thing too, right? It doesn't actually understand what the words mean. It's mimicking the style. So it was something that we kind of bumped into with these GPTs, right? Where you put your information in there
Yeah.
and then ask certain questions. There's certain questions it just simply does not know how to answer, because what it's going to do is take that content and mimic a response based on it. It doesn't actually understand what you mean. So you
Right.
can't give it instructions on how to do something and it will follow the instructions. It doesn't know how to do that. What it's
No.
going to do is give you back your instructions in a similar style. And
Right.
it's
Right.
like, yeah, that's not what I wanted you to do. So there's that huge limit to it. And that again kind of comes back to, okay, well, what information are we feeding into it? And that is, I think, going to be really start to be valuable as an individual, like our own
Right.
unique writing and thoughts. I think that's going to start to be even more valuable than it was before.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, it really comes down to how do we get the information into the student's head in
Hmm.
a quick but effective way that they can utilize the information.
Right.
And then how quickly can we get them through that basic foundation of knowledge so they can start pursuing,
Hmm.
and like you're saying, the neuroplasticity of these children.
Oh, they're
I'm
quick.
watching, I go back and I look at even babies that are not even crawling and yet they're curious about the world. And I think they
Yeah.
far better understand instruction or even things
Yeah.
that we're saying way earlier
Yep.
than we give them credit
I think
for.
so too.
And man, you start him.
Yeah.
My one of my granddaughters is 2 years old. I think almost
Hmm.
maybe three now, but even at 2 years old, she was saying, "Hi, my name's Kyrie. I can count to 10," and and whatever. And,
Yeah.
she was talking to people and very social. And some of
Hmm.
the people, I remember one at the in the checkout line, the lady's like, "Is she really only two?" And
Hmm.
the reason she's that way is because ever since she was a baby, the parents were, I guess, talking to her like a human,
Right.
like a
Yes. Yes.
baby,
Hmm.
and then also putting her in front of Miss Rachel, preschool YouTube videos, and that's all
Right.
she ever watched. And she
Yeah.
learned to speak very quickly, and she
Yeah.
learned what a dinosaur sounds like
Hmm.
and how she'll even, and at one and a half years old, she was like, "I'm a T-Rex, rah," and
Yeah.
you wouldn't expect a 1.5 year old to do that, but
Hmm.
what are kids capable of that we're just not giving them credit for?
Yeah.
And if we start them down this journey more quickly with even an AI tutor
Hmm.
that can just kind of teach them and work with
Yeah.
them, even a synthetic, I say synthetic, like synthesia, which is
Hmm.
you've probably seen that. It's just it's a person that's created by AI, but then you type a script and it'll talk
Oh,
and
yes.
human, that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
So you could have even an AI tutor now on the screen that could react to questions and answer questions at
Exactly.
one and a
Yes.
half years old and start educating their.
Yeah.
That could be exciting. You
Yes. I'm
have
excited about that
5 year
too.
olds that are at the 10th grade level,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
they we they're not bound by the school structure that says no, you can only learn this quickly.
Hmm. Yeah, and they absorb all kinds of fascinating information. Like, I don't know if you have little kids that will watch, they're into a certain show, but the show has like an English dialect, an English accent,
Mhm.
and then the kids start picking it up. They'll
Right,
start talking the same way.
right,
Peppa
right.
Pig is one that, yeah. And I think
Yep,
this is fascinating because they don't hear that accent in their
yeah,
day-to-day life, but it's enough that it's
yep,
clearly starting to affect it. I remember, like, just as an instructional designer, watching kids learn has been just fascinating because it's not like the way we adults think they learn sometimes. And let me give you an
mhm,
example. I think this is kind of the point you're getting at. Is like when my son he was like 4 or 5. He was on PBS Kids, the website PBS Kids, and playing some of their Curious George game, and he
yeah,
kept getting an answer wrong. And it was a simple math problem, like, if George is drinking 3 sodas and has 4 sodas and has two, and then how many are left, right? I knew he knew the answer, but he
right,
always got it wrong every single time. And so I thought, oh, I'm a teacher. I'll go over and I'll see, I'll coach him. And the first thing he tells me when I sit down is, okay, Dada, we have to get the X. Meaning he was deliberately getting it wrong, deliberately,
Because you
because he
want
liked the sound or something.
right.
Yeah. And I was like, now this is not taken into account. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like if I were the teacher and I were grading him, these would be wrong answers. But actually, no, he does know. He knows it better to the point where he knows how to manipulate it to produce the sound that he wants to
that he
that he
wanted.
wants. And it's like, maybe I don't know anything as a teacher. Maybe I just don't. Maybe I should start over.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was so interesting. I'm like, wow. Maybe instead of telling them how they should learn, I should be asking him.
Yeah.
And I think AI could fill in that niche pretty well. These
Yeah.
bots, these chatbots. Hmm.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of another story where this boy was saying, "Yeah, my look how dumb my younger brother is. Like, I'll show him you can have this nickel, which is bigger, or this dime, which is smaller." And
Hmm.
the kid always takes the nickel because it's
Oh
bigger.
yeah,
Like, see, he doesn't understand money. And
yeah.
one of the guys he was showing like pulled him out this little kid aside and said, "You understand the dime is worth more?" He's like, "Well, yeah, I know, but if I take the dime, you'll stop showing people, and I won't get the nickels."
Huh. Yep. There you go. Yep.
So
Yep. Or and it can. I was. It's funny because what I thought you were going to say is like maybe he just wanted the bigger ones. Like yeah, it's worth more. I
yeah,
don't care. I like the bigger ones
yeah,
because I'm using them for something else. And
right.
that's kind of that values based thing I'm talking about. Like
Hmm.
so they're not their goal orientation, if you will, is not the same as the teacher or the instructions. Like actually, I see the value in this in the correct answer very differently than this
Yep.
other person.
Right.
And the system that juggernaut that we have set up right now has a very narrow definition of what's of value, and
Yeah.
there's more and more and more students that are falling outside of that. And I think there always have been. I don't think that's new. I
Yeah.
think that's always been that case. But I think
Yep.
now we're starting to really say, okay, how do we reach more and more and more? And I think these
Yeah.
AI tools are a way that it could easily be done.
Yeah.
Remains to see how effective, but it's certainly
Mhm.
there.
Yeah. No, I think right now the education system is good in the fact that we are educating the children,
Hmm.
but I think it's set up in a way that slows down the
Yes.
learning process that some
Hmm.
some children can learn more quickly than others,
Yes.
and but so the system is around the slowest learner so that
Hmm.
everyone can keep up. And but that doesn't mean that the person who doesn't learn as fast isn't as
No.
smart. It just means it's not interested
Yeah. Yeah.
in that
Yeah. It could
part.
be they're just not interested. Yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly. And it might be like I've seen like it might be just that topic, just that day, just that whoever. Like you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
Um, like you were talking about like for yourself in math, for example. Like there was a moment of click, and then it's all different. And I've seen that happen with students over and over and over again. Something will shift, and all of a sudden it takes on a whole different perspective. And it's just like as a teacher knowing that that will come at some point. Hopefully it's in the class that they have with me so they can share it to my supervisors and all this kind of stuff, right? But
Right.
oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it's years and years and years later. And that's
Hmm.
and that's cool. And I did want to add something. Like when we're talking about that system, and when I'm talking about the system, what I am not referring to are teachers. That is not what I'm referring to.
Right.
I've worked as an instructional designer with teachers over and over, and teachers have a great heart. They're doing the best they can, and it is not an easy job.
Hmm.
As a teacher in higher ed, and there's a lot of conflicting priorities. There's a lot of from between administration, parents, students, the teacher's own personal life, and the things that you're trying to do. Let alone if you're in higher ed and you're also trying to publish and publish or perish, as they say. You're trying to do that. There's a lot going on for teachers, and I
Right.
think I don't blame them for the system at all. They are just in the system. The system has
Right.
a life of its own, but these tools could be a great way, and this is where I see podcasts like the ones you're talking about really offering value for
Hmm.
teachers and faculty is practical applications of these so they can reduce the work burden off themselves, use AI to try to help them out, and also help the students. It's a win all across the board, is kind of what I'm getting at. So I
Right.
just want to make that clear that by no means am I disparaging teachers at all. We're here to help. That's what we're trying to do. I think that's the point of the conversation overall is
Yeah.
let
Absolutely.
us
I mean,
explore this and come up with ideas.
thank God for teachers because if we didn't have teachers, we may not have employees
Yeah,
in general.
exactly.
They'd have to
Yeah.
stay home with the kids. You know, I mean,
Hmm.
not only are they trying to teach their babysitting our children
Yes.
for 8 hours a day so we can go to work, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And but another, and kind of going back to the hindrance that the school system has. For example, my other grandson is in first grade,
Hmm.
and the teachers are not sure what to do with him. They're saying
Ah.
he didn't do his work on Monday, he didn't do his work on Tuesday, but I guess Wednesday he felt like it, so he did all the work for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
I did it all at once. Yeah.
Right. Just get out of the
Okay.
way. And I'm like, well, if he
Okay.
can learn, if he can do the work 3 times faster, he should
Yeah.
be done with ninth grade in 3 years.
Right. But the
Right?
system is not set up to allow that,
Right.
unfortunately. Which,
Right.
yeah, which is
So,
interesting. Yeah, kids, I think, like you're saying, they can move much quicker
yeah.
on their own pace.
But you have to have these separate AI type entities to
Hmm.
take. Are you ready for the next lesson? Yeah, I am. Let's go.
Yeah.
And they're not going to get tired. And the
Hmm.
AI is just, not. It's just when the kid,
Yeah.
I'm done for the day. He's done for the day. But
Right.
he
And
needs
he's,
to come back the
yeah.
next day and do 4 days worth of work.
Hmm.
Like,
And it's gonna free up competency-based learning. Like
mhm,
there's some of those, and I've been at some schools where they were exploring that because they realize, like, okay, the system, it's set up so that everyone has to progress at the same pace, but that's ludicrous if we have
right.
so many students. Like, obviously everyone's going to be different.
Yeah.
But the structure, especially online, is such that it's very difficult to do it in a dynamic way. Now introduce AI, I think that will begin to change.
Right.
And now with competency-based learning, which Dr. Gribben, he has a lot of experience in that, which is, it's set up exactly the way you're talking about. It's, you're learning at your own pace, and at various checkpoints you demonstrate competency in various ways, and then once you've done that you can move on to the next thing. But
Hmm.
it's no set time, so it can be as fast as you want. Yeah, if you want to do all your work on Monday and take the rest of the week off, cool. If you want to distribute it, cool. I mean, so it's infinitely adaptable to different kind of learning styles, and I'm really excited to see how
Yeah.
AI can really make that a dynamic process. And I think that's kind of the I don't want to say the gold standard, but maybe the next gold standard, I should say, where
Right.
we're getting, because it's obviously going to continue to improve. But one thing I would really like to see is AI integrated into competency-based learning,
Yeah.
connected to a value system, so that it can adapt the content dynamically to students on the fly, wherever they are,
Yeah.
wherever and whenever they want to learn.
Yeah.
That would very much start to change that
Right.
system, because it would
Well, I
make no
think
sense to do it a different way at that point.
right, and
Yeah.
I think that's where we're headed. I
Hmm.
mean, we have to, unless you have people in the school saying, no, we have to shut this AI nonsense down
Hmm.
and not allow students to use it and ban it from our schools, and so
Yeah.
I think that could be a mistake.
I think that would be a mistake too. I think, like, I could see regulating it. It's like, sort of like they
Mhm.
allow, like Google and certain things, in classrooms, but they narrow down what you can Google, obviously,
Right, yeah,
in
yeah,
K-12 and things like that.
yeah.
And I
They'll
think
find a way
AI,
around it,
yeah, but they always do. I know
right?
there's always some, hacker in fourth grade that has found a
Yeah,
way around it, and that,
yeah,
yeah, and they've, given it to their friends or whatever. Um, but I do think, yeah, but just trying to exclude it, that's a disservice to everybody involved, to be quite frank.
right.
Because again, whatever we're training these students to go into the world is going to include AI. And
Hmm.
if they don't know how to use it, and if they haven't been learning with it, they're at a major disadvantage when they
Right.
enter the marketplace, or
Yeah.
or an education system that does use it. They're
Right.
not going to know
Yeah.
what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Kids are going to use it anyway, so
Oh
I
yeah.
think it really comes down to we've got to find a way to structure how they use it.
Hmm.
And
The process, the
but again,
method.
it goes back to
Yeah.
the values. Teach them
Hmm.
why you want to use it a certain way, because it's
Yeah.
not about just getting the answer. It's about understanding the material.
Yes, it's like, and that value. It's like, so. What I think is the real kind of thing about the values. If it can connect to their value, then they'll
Hmm.
understand why. Oh, this is why I don't want to cheat.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't want to cheat because I'm robbing myself of the opportunity to learn, and that's going to cost me later. Not because of some external punishment that might happen to me, although that
Right.
might be a deterrent as well. But ultimately, if it's coming from inside, it's like, I don't want to cheat because I'm robbing myself of the opportunity to learn more and
Hmm.
improve myself. that will deter cheating. Then they
Right.
won't, you know what I mean? Then they won't cheat
Yeah.
because like as an adult, like as entrepreneurs, we see that. It's like, okay, if we're robbing ourselves of an opportunity to learn something, it's going to cost us down the road. Like it's a skill that we need to learn. It's whatever it is, right? So
Mhm.
I see that definitely playing into with students in education and learning as we go forward.
Yeah, and we are gonna have to look at the motivation factors as well. I mean,
Hmm.
we've got a lot of kids these days who don't even want a job because they just want to
Yeah,
play video games and stream and make
yeah,
money doing that. It's like
yeah.
I don't
Which,
need to understand math and science. I just need to be good at
yeah.
Fortnite because I can make a killing.
Hmm.
So
And what
there's
I'm
issues
curious
there.
about is to ask AI. I might just do this after after we hop off here. I
Yeah.
might just ask GPT to explain to me how, like, say, algebra will help
Mhm.
me play Fortnite better.
Right. Yeah.
I'm really curious if it can come up with an answer. And it's those kinds of things. If it can,
Hmm.
that is awesome. Because I, as a teacher, I don't play Fortnite and I failed most of my math courses.
Right.
It wasn't until college that it started clicking, and that's
Right.
when I learned the applied side of it. Um, but if it can start to make those connections for people to say, okay, well, here's why. Here's a way this might help. And I doubt it has anything to do with the specifics of algebra, but it's probably like the way these formulas think. It's the how. It's the way this expression is presenting the information. That perspective of information could help you in Fortnite in this way. So I'm really
Right.
curious. And those are those kind of unique, like you were talking about with the barrier, right? These unique
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
things that could just pop out. But I'm really curious because if it could do that, suddenly Fortnite students might be, players might be way more interested in other
In algebra.
topics.
Yeah.
Yes.
Science, things like that. Well, and if the
Hmm.
AI can produce that, then it's just another reason why AIs could be good in
Exactly.
school and be good teachers.
And that's the, yeah, and this is the training that you're talking about. And then that's
Right.
the real importance behind it because it won't be able to do it without us.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And teaching it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, interesting stuff. Yeah, we need to. I'm going to be speaking to Eric next week.
Hmm.
I would love to. Is Eric in Denver? You're in Denver, or are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm in Fort Collins, but I mean, it's an
Yeah.
hour away from Denver.
I'm kind of curious if we could get you, me, and Eric in a room, like a better
I was going to ask you the same question.
and just talk about this
Have a
stuff, kind of
roundtable.
like what we're
Yeah.
doing, but more in an open and
Yeah.
podcasting three-person environment, and just
I'm
talking
glad you
about
brought that up. Yeah. I was going to ask you the same thing. And I'm like, oh, wait, he's in Salt Lake. Maybe that's too far. Like, but if you're in town
just want
again,
out there for that. Yeah, you bet.
yeah, I, absolutely. And Denver's not far. I cruise down and have meetings with Eric
Well, and I
once
think
a
we
week
have
or
a
so.
chief conference in June. I'll be back for that
Yes.
anyway. It's not
Yes.
too far out, but I'd be willing to fly back sooner just to get in the room and
Yeah. Oh,
talk, and
okay.
even get a panel, and even try to get more educators in a room. If we
Yeah.
pack a room and just have a panel, that'd
That'd
be
be
an interesting
great.
type of,
Yes.
And I'm not an educator, so I would be what's the word I'm looking for? Not the monitor, the
The
person
moder
asking the questions.
Yeah, the
Moderator.
moderator.
Yeah,
Or
I'd be the
mediator. I
moderator.
don't know. Mediator is more for like an argument, although
Yeah,
maybe it will need that too.
I was thinking more the moderator. Like,
Yeah.
I'll ask questions, you guys talk, and we just
Uh,
pick up questions, and but that would be neat to have just a panel of us in a room
absolutely.
and
And
have some.
between Eric and I, we knew some people locally that might have interesting viewpoints that could offer insights and stuff. I'd love to get people from different, like teachers from different industries, like art.
Yeah,
I'm just curious what their take is on it because I don't teach art. Like I was teaching composition and instructional design, so absolutely.
maybe I'll take some snippets of those videos and create some ads and invite teachers to come to Denver for
Yes,
an event or
and
something.
do like
And
a symposium of some kind or
yeah,
something like
that'd be
that.
pretty neat. Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
like
all.
it. These are great ideas, and I summer would probably be good if we're inviting teachers because they're
Yeah,
off. Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, June. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
somewhere in June. It gives them time to wrap up the last year.
yeah. So now I can plug. If you're watching this video, June, we're gonna have.
Hmm.
Anyway, we'll see. But that'd be kind of cool to
Absolutely.
put that together. Man, I did not mean to take up this much of your time, but
This
it's
was
been
great. I'm
so cool.
so glad we were able to chat for this long. I
Yeah.
love it.
Well, I would love to get more information about. I'll take this video, I'll send it to you, and then you can share it among your
Okay, thank
followers
you.
and things too.
Hmm.
And then if we, and then you could also have, we could put information in the description about where they could come and subscribe to your newsletter,
Yes.
things like that too, so people can kind of learn more of that.
Hmm.
But yeah, you, me, Eric, we need to keep in touch. We need to work on this.
Absolutely.
And I went on Facebook the other day, interesting enough, and I just said I'm on a mission to use AI to change the education system for the better. Thinking, I wonder what this is going to start, you know? But I had so many people come online and say, awesome, great job. Yes, looking forward to it.
Nice.
Teachers coming on and saying, yeah, I would love to learn more. How are you going to do this? These are some of the things that I'm doing.
Hmm.
And I think there are a lot of teachers out there who are just like, yes, let's change the education
Yes.
system. What do we have to do? It
Absolutely.
was a much different response than I thought I was going to get.
Well, and that's what I mean. That I want to make sure that none of this comes out as disparaging to teachers at all, because
Mhm.
my experience is exactly the same. They are all like, yes, 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 let's do this. Like,
Right.
we need to mix this up. This is not working. They can see their students not, they can see their students
Yeah.
struggling, and they care.
You're right.
They
That's,
care. They want them to succeed. Like you said, they're with the kids a long time out of the day, and you
mhm.
form connections with them. I always formed
You
connections
really
with a lot of
do.
my
I mean, I
students. Yeah.
remember a lot of the teachers I had K through
Hmm.
college. I mean, and I remember what they looked like, what they talked about,
Yeah.
and personality types, and it wasn't just some passerby that taught you
No.
something left. I mean,
Yeah. It was.
yeah,
Yeah, there was a connection. There was some sort of emotional connection. Even from a teacher's perspective, there's students that'll often like, if I've lost contact with them on LinkedIn or whatever,
hmm
I kind of wonder how they're doing, and I'm like, I wonder if
yeah,
they really did learn anything from my class that they're
right,
applying here 5, 10 years later. And I'm just curious. I mean, maybe it's no. I'd be interested to know that as a teacher,
yeah,
going forward. But I don't know. Anyway, it's going down another rabbit hole.
yeah.
That's a great. We have a lot of great things to talk about
Well, I
for the
mean,
podcast.
we could even do another podcast that goes into more of the motivation side. How do we
Hmm.
motivate kids? How do we give them a reason to go to school? And how,
Yes,
yeah, and what
that's
is,
that's a topic I could definitely talk on
yeah,
that for an hour, because it's my personal frustration with that system,
yeah,
is that emotions are simply not even considered
hmm,
as a piece of the learning equation, not even considered, blown
right,
off. Unless we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs or something like that. But it's like, no, it
yeah,
really, it's a vital factor to all of it, because the stuff that we relearn, for example, your your epiphany about math, that
right,
came with an emotional context,
yep,
did it not?
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yep,
And that has to be included
hmm,
in. I could see when you were talking about it, the excitement. Like, yeah,
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
emotional characterization of it. That's important. But it's
right.
not considered as part of the education equation right now. And I'm like, why?
Yeah, I
Why
mean, all of a
not?
sudden, I felt smart and like
Yes.
I realized that I'm not destined to failure. I got it.
No.
You know, I get it
Yeah, you
now.
got it.
But yeah, right. And so it's
Yeah.
like I can do anything now. I can do math wrong.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Well, it's that feeling that, like, as an educator, we look for that. It's like, yes, they got it.
hmm
They've overcome the barrier that they think they can't. That's
Yep.
primarily what it is. It's
Yep.
like, I have a lot of students that, I'm not a writer. I just can't do it. I just can't, whatever. Like, I don't care where you're starting. The goal is to end up being better. That otherwise I did a disservice as a teacher. So I think as we start to explore that, as we look at those kinds of moments of, in Zen, it was called Satori, the lightning strike. Oh yes, I
Mhm.
got it. I've crossed this barrier, and
Yep.
I think like an AI system, we could start to capitalize on that and really encourage those moments of growth and learning down all kinds of different avenues.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
And go down the road of the things that they do understand
Hmm.
just out of the womb, kind of per
Right.
se. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, this has been a great conversation. I've
Yes.
recorded the whole thing.
I know. Yeah. It
I
sounds
don't know if
great.
anyone's going to watch an hour and 40 minutes, but if they do,
I know.
it's good stuff in here. So I'm
Oh.
excited. Yeah, but we definitely need to keep in touch.
Hmm.
I got your email, phone number,
Yeah.
text
LinkedIn.
me
Yeah.
back.
Oh yes, that's right.
I'll talk to Eric and let's see if we can put together some more of these types of things, invite more people
Absolutely.
into this and kind of grow
Yes.
this whole community.
Hmm. And let's absolutely keep that, the roundtable idea on the
Yeah,
table, so to speak. I think that would be a great idea, in person
yeah,
discussion.
let's do that. That'd be sweet.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Rob, this was fantastic. I've never
Yeah,
done anything like this before. This is great. So thanks so
yeah.
much.
I just stopped the recording and